Hello and welcome to the Australian Roundtable podcast. Today is Sunday the 22nd of February 2015. This is episode 20 of our weekly broadcast live at youtube.com/Australian Roundtable from 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time every Sunday, and also archived at the same channel for later listening. I'm your host Johnno, and I'm joined in Google Hangout by Ethan Nash of TOTT News. Thanks for being there.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And we're joined via Google Hangout by our resident wise old elder, the silver fox himself, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here.
And we are also joined by yet another fresh face here at the Australian Roundtable podcast. Making his debut on the show today is Tristan. We're glad you could make it.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Now, we will get to a proper introduction for you shortly, but first, because the ARP continues to grow, we're now up to over 1,000 subscribers as of this week. I will read out this short little blurb for the benefit of any new listeners. The Australian Roundtable podcast is a Brisbane-based independent news analysis discussion panel podcast which broadcasts live every Sunday from 3 p.m. AEST. Live listeners can also take part in the live chat forum at the YouTube channel during broadcast. The show features an eclectic panel of presenters who come together each week to discuss recent and topical news and current affairs from Australia and around the world, and provides an alternative perspective to that presented by the mainstream media. Views presented by individual panelists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and each presenter is solely responsible for his or her own comments and claims. All important information cited during the broadcast will be linked to at our website, ozroundtable.com, so you can verify and analyse it for yourself, which I, for one, recommend you do. Episodes generally run to 2 hours, and although it's a roundtable discussion, we do keep to a rough structure for each episode, generally breaking the show up into a domestic and international segment. I'll get to the rundown for today's show right now. First off, we'll give a proper introduction to our new friend, Tristan. Then we'll give our brief introduction with a bit of a laugh looking at the Gogglebox, and then we'll get straight into the domestic segment where we'll look at Dole-bludging terrorists, which will then move into the topic on Homeland Security, which I know that Ethan has plenty to say about. Then we'll discuss the updates with David Hicks, who has now been declared innocent. Then we'll talk about Abbott, who apparently wants to declare war on Iraq unilaterally. Then we'll discuss the drones that are planned for Australia. And then we'll change it up a bit. We'll talk about fluoride in the water, and finally an update on the Royal Commission into sex abuse here in Australia. Then we'll move on to the international segment where we'll discuss an update on the Vicar who was banned because he discussed Israel's involvement in 9/11. Then we'll take a quick look at Benjamin Netanyahu, old mate Netanyahu, and how he was stung lying to the media. Then we'll talk about the UN, who has revealed the links with Syrian rebels. And finally, Lindsay will get to discuss war and some of the things that he knows about that. And that will round out the program. So it's going to be a packed show today, guys. We have to get straight into it. And first up, we'll get straight to you there, Tristan. And it's great that you could join us on the show finally. We've been trying to get you in for a while. I thought we'd start off by giving you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself and why it is you're on the show today.
No worries. Thanks, Johnno. Well, hey all. I'm someone who's only recently started paying attention to these hoaxes. Before I looked into it properly, I always felt that people didn't question things as often as they should. For the most part, the majority of my friends and some of my family just seem to meander through the lies that are given to us daily. And I'm hoping that by speaking out on this show and to other avenues, such as music, that other people might start to realize the severity of the situation that we're in. Also, I'd love to learn more about what's going on from people who've been in this scene much longer than I.
That's a good answer, and obviously Tristan is taking this whole show so seriously that he's prepared his answers to my questions. My mistake of giving you the questions in advance, but we do like to always ask people when they come on the show these kinds of questions. How did you get into this? What effect has it had on you? And a question I always ask is, when was it first you realised that you were being lied to by the media and by government on a grand scale?
Well, I've never really trusted the news. I'm not sure why or where that stigma ideology sort of originated from. As long as I can remember, I've always taken a news report with a grain of salt. And growing up in a non-PC family, specifically my dad, I'm sure that definitely contributed towards it. It wasn't until mid last year, meeting you, Johnno, well, spending more time with you and other people like that, that I really started looking into this properly, that I realized the scale and the vast quantity of the lies that we've been subjected to.
Wow, good answer. Okay, then one more from me, and then I'll throw it to the other panelists. And this is a question I love to ask people. Now that you're doing your own research and coming to your own conclusions, how has this impacted on your relationships with friends and family? And can you talk about things like Building 7 with your friends and family?
That's a tough one, Johnno. My true friends, I would say yes. However, for myself, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have experienced, these topics are great filters. It's kind of like a sieve to separate those who are really there for you and those that pretend to be. And some might ask, how does talking about these topics indicate if they're your friend or not? And I found that most people that blindly reject any evidence you put in front of them can actually get quite heated in these discussions. Furthermore, if you ask them if they'd stand up for you in face of the government, most would say no. And so to answer the question, it's made me realize how few genuine friends I actually have, and it's actually really inspired me to look for more people like yourself.
Well, that's a great answer. Well, that's all that I've got, so I'll throw it to the other panelists there. Lindsay, do you have any questions for the latest addition to the Australian Roundtable podcast?
Yeah. Did you say you were going to do it through music, or did I mishear that?
You're absolutely correct on that. Look, it's a bit hard to say at this point, but one of the goals for this year is to create an album, sort of through artistic medium, creating a dystopian environment in which we're lied to, and really portraying that through music. Something I'm very passionate about, something that I find a lot of people can relate to. Music's something that everyone enjoys, and I haven't really experienced too many people within my friends and stuff that are into this that are exposing that avenue. So I think that it's something that can be capitalized on.
Okay, thank you.
And Ethan, we're blessed to be joined by our fourth in-studio guest, and sadly you're not here with us to meet him for yourself once again. I know you've met Tristan before, but do you have any questions you want to ask him live on the air today?
Yeah, I do, Johnno. Thanks. Good to speak with you, Tristan. It's a shame I couldn't be in the studio for your debut. I know I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while, but just expanding on from music, I just wanted to talk generally about that, because I am a person who also tries to express myself through music and finds comfort and enlightenment in truth music that is out there, the wonderful artists that are out there. I just wanted to talk to you about, what do you think music presents to this movement that that other avenues don't present? Because for me, I've always seen that music is a universal language, and it can communicate with anyone on the planet, anywhere. And I think that that's a really powerful message. I'm interested to get your perspective on that.
I agree. Universal language, key point there. Something that everyone can really appreciate. And look, I find that people react emotionally to music, and you can sort of get to people on a much deeper level sometimes than what resonates with words. And that's not always the case, but I found that a lot of people, music does really resonate with them in a lot of different levels, deeper than what you can traditionally get with spoken word. And that's something that I really like to try and use, is to use that and to sort of raise awareness of these topics through things that are seemingly innocent, but then the more you sort of get into it, the more you realize the depth of work gone into that music.
No, that's brilliant. I couldn't agree more, mate. I'll throw that back to you, Johnno.
Yeah, well, the reason why I love the idea of using music to get the truth out there is how much of an influence it's had on me over the years. And I look at songs like Lazy Boys, Underwear Goes Inside the Pants. I first saw that when I was like 15 or 16. And so I was very impressionable at the time. And this idea of laughing at how things are, to see how absurd they are, it's very powerful stuff. And so it's great to have Tristan on board and using his musical talents, for the benefit of this movement. It's exciting for me, and I can't wait to see what he can produce. And who knows, maybe when he does get ready to release some singles, he'll do it as a live and exclusive through the Australian Roundtable podcast.
There you go.
Why not? All right, guys. Well, we do have a lot to get through today. So, Tristan, thanks for joining us. We'll throw to you during the show, but we must get through to the topics. Before we go any further, I don't know if you guys are aware, but yesterday, our time, today, American time, is the 50th anniversary of the death of Malcolm X. So, throughout the show, I will be quoting some of my favorite Malcolm X quotes. Now, you don't have to be a fan of Malcolm X's overall position or some of the things that he did during his life to appreciate the truth in his quotes. So during the course of today's episode, I'm just going to throw a few quotes out there just to get the thoughts murmuring up there in people's heads. This is one from an interview that he did, a declaration back in 1964. He said, quote, "There can be no black-white unity until there is first some black unity. There can be no workers' solidarity until there is first some racial solidarity. We cannot think of uniting with others until we have first united among ourselves. We cannot think of being acceptable to others until we have first proven acceptable to ourselves. One can't rule bananas with scattered leaves, end quote. How brilliant is that? And again, I'm not quoting him because I support everything he ever said or did, but the man clearly had some insight, and so today I'm going to be sharing some of that with you by reading out the quotes. And a comment from Lord Rollo in the live chat, he says, blah, blah, fine print. I agree. I don't like reading out that blurb. You know what I should do from now on? From now on, I should give the new guests the role of reading out the blurb. Lord Rollo, because of you, thanks to you from now on, every time we have a new guest, that's going to be the new guest's job, is to read out the blurb. How's that sound? Now, on to the first topic. And I know that we've got, you want to say something, Lindsay, about Gogglebox.
Yes, I do indeed. In Brisbane's daily paper, the Courier Mail, which is a Murdoch paper, on Saturday, that was yesterday, they had an article about Gogglebox, and it made me think of Ethan straight away, because last week Ethan did a segment on Gogglebox, and I'd never heard of Gogglebox before. And I'll quote it. It may only be being watched by two people and a parrot on television, but Gogglebox is having a big impact online. And that intrigued me because that means that you, Ethan, had one other person and a parrot watching Gogglebox with you last week. But your review, obviously, yours was the only review. If you were the only other person watching it, your review on this podcast must have caused a sensation online.
No, that's. I wasn't aware that few people were watching it. That's actually a positive thing. That actually makes my soul happy that people aren't interested in sitting down in front of the television to watch this. But I have spoken to some people that have been watching it since its debut episode, which the power of the tongue, Lindsay. I've started something I can't stop now, but people are beginning to love it after the first episode online, as you mentioned, and as the Courier Mail mentioned, and we can joke all we want, but that's a really disturbing thing. People loving a TV show where the television is watching you. It's ridiculous. Johnno, what do you think?
I think we've said enough about Gogglebox for today. It's time to move on now. Into the domestic segment proper. And the first topic for today is Dole-bludging terrorists. And Lindsay, I know you wanted to start this one off, so take it away.
Okay, I'll do that. In the same Saturday edition of the Courier Mail was the quote or headline, "There are benefits in being a terrorist." A day after their latest show of force, jihadists claiming affiliation with the Islamic State group took over the university in the Libyan city of Sirte, S-I-R-T-E, yesterday. And that's the end of the quote. The thing that impressed me about this article was the large picture of at least 6 and probably more new Toyota Land Cruiser utes in a convoy. And they were obviously doing a parade. And I thought at the time, nothing but the best for the jihadists. And this opens up the question of just who is funding them and buying them all new toys. The next one, which was in the same article, was, quote, "No concern for the welfare of others, but they get paid," end of quote. Almost all the wannabe terrorists who have sneaked out of Australia to join jihadist armies in Iraq and Syria were on the dole or some form of welfare payment, the Courier Mail can reveal. And that was the end of the quote. There was another one about hotspots for extremists, but I think that's a different topic. So I'll throw back to you, John.
Well, basically, mate, I was looking through your notes for the show, and I thought I'd look into this one further, and I've got an article here from the Courier Mail, similar to your one, entitled "PM Says Terrorists on Welfare Unacceptable." This is from Feb 21. Quote, "Prime Minister Tony Abbott has foreshadowed a crackdown on abuse of welfare by terrorist supporters. He said up to November, 55 of 57 Australians who had travelled to the Middle East to join the Islamist death cult had been on welfare, and that wasn't good enough. If you are fit enough to go overseas to fight for a terrorist organisation, surely you should not be abusing the welfare system back in Australia," he told reporters in Darwin on Saturday. Mr Abbott will deliver his long-awaited national security statement on Monday, detailing what the government is doing to ensure Australians were safe abroad and at home. He said he would address many issues. One of them is the fact that for too long we have given people who don't have this country's interests at heart the benefit of the doubt, he said. One of those would appear to be Harun Monis, the Iranian-born asylum seeker and perpetrator of the Sydney Martin Place siege. Monis, who had taken 18 people hostage, was shot dead when police stormed the cafe, ending the crisis that shocked Australia and made headlines worldwide. 2 hostages died. Previously, Mr. Abbott has said Monis had taken advantage of the Australian system, and at every step of the way, he was given the benefit of the doubt. A joint New South Wales and Commonwealth report on dealings with Monis before the siege is tipped to be released on Sunday, today, ahead of Mr. Abbott's security statement. A media report says that's likely to result in a tougher stance on immigration requirements. Also in the spotlight is Islamist group Hizb al-Tahrir, which Attorney General Brand has said had for a long time been close to the edge. We are concerned that Hizb al-Tahrir is feeding a climate which makes it easier for terrorist recruiters to do their work, he told ABC Television on Friday. Hizb al-Tahrir is an international Muslim organization founded in 1955, that looks like, with about 300 adherents in Australia. It advocates a strict Islamic state or Salafate in the Middle East under Islamic law. The group is banned in many Middle East countries and also in Russia, Turkey, Pakistan and Germany, but not in Australia, the US or UK. It's never explicitly advocated violence, but it rejects democracy and is equivocal on condemning terrorist violence. Senator Brand said the government would do what needed to be done. In some circumstances, monitoring and surveillance is the most efficacious tool. In some circumstances, prohibition, he said, end quote. And thanks to listeners for bearing with me there. Now, I've got a couple of points to make on this. Point one, we now have terrorist dole-bludgers. Today, tonight, and a current affair viewers are frothing at the mouth just hearing about this, but it gets worse. The Australian Roundtable podcast can reveal that these same dole-bludging terrorists were also working cash in hand on the side as, get this, dodgy builders. Yes, and not only that, they were ripping off the elderly by giving low quotes on home renovations, taking 50% deposits up front, and then skipping the country. That's right. So we have dole-bludging terrorists rotting the welfare system and ripping off the elderly as dodgy builders. No penalty is too harsh for these dastardly villains. And can you imagine the mindset of the person that this propaganda is intended to influence? Think about Kylie out there in Werribee or Bankstown or Logan. Think about what she's thinking right now when she watches this on a current affair. I never liked those terrorists one bit out there blowing people up, but when I found out that they were dole-bludging too, that's when I knew we had to do something to stop them. Now, point two that I want to make about this article, this is a bit more serious. Let's quote from that article. A joint New South Wales and Commonwealth report on dealings with Monis before the siege is tipped to be released on Sunday, ahead of Mr. Abbott's security speech. Well, what are the odds of that? They will release a report detailing how they just didn't have the resources to keep track of this guy moments before Abbott will issue a public security statement. Who could possibly guess what Abbott might have to say? My next point. They want to ban a Muslim group which has never explicitly advocated violence, and it rejects democracy and is equivocal on condemning terrorist violence. Well, let's see. They reject democracy, do they? They sound just like the Western governments who rejected the overwhelming vote to secede by the people of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. And they've never explicitly advocated violence, haven't they? Well, then they're flower girls compared to the Zionist governments like our own, who openly declare that they want to destroy and degrade groups in the Middle East. Groups funded, armed, and trained by the CIA and Mossad and her allies, mind you, and are constantly beefing up the police at home. Now, this group are equivocal about condemning terrorist violence, are they? Well, they sound like outright utopian pacifists compared to our own government here in Australia, which fully supports, on both sides of Parliament, Israel and its wanton slaughter of innocent Arabs in Palestine, including the massacre of over 2,000 Palestinians in last year's Operation Protective Edge. For these reasons and more, I don't mind if George Brandis bans this organisation for the supposed risks that it poses to the people in this country, so long as he is consistent and bans the Liberal National Party, the Australian Labor Party, and any other organisation full of quislings who do the bidding of the real governments of this world, those found in, among other places, Washington, London, and of course, Tel Aviv. Now, all of those things that I just read out are from one article in the Courier Mail, and in a way, I kind of wish this was the London of 1984, because at least there, the Ministry of Truth went to great lengths to at least make their propaganda seem internally consistent, if not factually historically accurate. What's more, at least Minitrue updated their articles. In Australia, we get given the exact same propaganda they get in Britain, only we get it months later. See this from the Telegraph. Jihadists funded by welfare benefits, senior police officer warns. This is from the Telegraph in England on the 26th of November 2014. Quote, Taxpayers' money is being claimed fraudulently and used by terrorists in countries such as Iraq and Syria, according to Terry Nicholson from the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command Unit, end quote. Now, I won't bother reading out the whole article because you get the picture here. We've been rehashed the same article from 3 months ago in Britain. Lindsay, I'll throw it straight back to you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. But this is typical of Murdoch, and they do this stuff all the time. And we've talked about this before, about Howard and the Prime Minister in Canada making statements which are identical. It's almost, we talk about puppet masters, it's almost like there is a puppet master telling these people in different countries what to say. Okay, back to you.
Oh, I'll throw that one over to you there. Ethan, what do you think?
You made some fantastic points, Jono, and I do have a lot to say. I've got a lot to expand on what Abbott's actually going to be talking about at that national security press conference tomorrow. But until we get to that, I want to throw to Tristan and see what he thinks about this, because that sounds to me like a current affair producer's nipples are so hard they're going to pierce through their shirts, Tristan.
Yeah, look, I think this really plays at Australian people who don't really understand what's going on, plays at the heartstrings, and will bring a lot of people on board with Abbott's new security regimes, whatever they might be, just to justify tighter regimes on the Australian populace. Yeah, over to you, John.
Well, I mean, the point that I'm making here is how ridiculous is this that they're saying, look, people aren't scared enough of the terrorists, so we have to find some other way to further vilify the terrorists. And what's the easiest way to vilify someone in Australia today? Tell the world that they're sucking from the welfare teat the wrong way, and then people go from thinking, the terrorists, who cares, to those bloody terrorists. It shows what a state that we're in today, when they can't demonize people enough with terrorists because they've used that one too many times. So now they have to go back to old faithful Dole-bludgers. Ethan, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Jono. And as Tristan said, it is pulling on the heartstrings, and it's pulling together all of these things to just sensationalize the imaginary threat even more in the minds of the people. I read an article that was from the UK, from the Daily Mail, that the title read, "ISIS fighters contract Ebola." You know what I mean? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Now ISIS fighters have attracted Ebola. Not only are they coming to take away your freedoms, but they're going to give everyone Ebola in the process. It's just madness. And all of these are just sensationalized rubbish articles that are used to, resonate in the subconscious of the people, Jono.
I am certain that there was a Courier Mail front page, Courier Mail being the only newspaper here in Brisbane owned by Murdoch. I'm certain there was a front page that literally did connect terrorism and Ebola with a massive front page photo. I can't remember the headline, but it was basically like Ebola terror or something like that, the day after they were running the whole ISIS campaign as well. So they were literally deliberately trying to tie the two up into people's minds just to get them scared. Like, if that isn't terrorism, I don't know what is. And Tristan, you've been too quiet, my friend, so I'm throwing that one back to you.
Look, I think it's quite funny. Again, playing more at the heartstrings of people. They're looking at any opportunity to make people scared and validate the existence of this terrorization group. And look, what better way to scare people than Ebola? Kind of reminds me of like the propaganda campaigns that they put forth in World War II and World War I about the Japanese and Russians and stuff like that. They're coming to get your children and that sort of thing. Look, it's really interesting. I'd love to know how far they go with this. And yeah, it's quite funny.
What do you think would scare the average voter out there in Western Sydney more? That the terrorists are coming to get their children, or that the terrorists are dole-bludgers?
Yeah, well, we're very protective. I don't know if you guys experience as Australians, but you speak to a lot of people, and we're so protective of our welfare money and what it's being spent on. We're happy to spend it on a whole bunch of other things like tunnels and expensive NBN programs, which might not even work. But if terrorists are stealing it,
Well, because it's because they've got it in their mind that people who are on welfare are taking money from them, but actually people on welfare are taking it from the government, and it's the government that takes from them. And the way I see it, I've got no problem with people on welfare. In fact, I like it. I'd rather the money go to them that they'll spend on food or whatever here in this country than the money be spent on more submarines to be sent to do what? Project influence across the world, stuff that. Yeah. If it was up to me, we'd have 10 times as many dole-bludgers and 1/10 as much spending on defence. Lindsay, what's for you?
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue because I'm just thinking about the people with social credit. That was their whole an idea. You can't get that across in 5 seconds, but that there is a connection between everybody shouldn't have to have a job. There should be a ticket system where people can get money without having to work, because the whole country is producing a certain amount, and each of us, say there were 20 million. Okay, we all have an interest in this country and what it produces as a GDP. So there are various different ways of looking at this, and in some ways I agree with you, in some ways I don't. Back to you.
Yeah, I think that's your National Socialism coming through there, Lindsay. I'm only kidding, mate. I'm only mucking around. Hey, Gary McAntanista in the live chat says that they're giving us George Orwell's 1984, 2 minutes of hate against the boogeyman Muslims. I wish that were true, but this isn't 2 minutes. This has been non-stop for months and months and months now. Can they just let it? Why do they always have to scare the people? Of course, we know the answer. They have to keep the people in fear, because when people are in fear, they're more easy to control. And Adam Bravo in the live chat says that they're destroying language and our ability to communicate adequately by altering words like terrorist and conspiracy theorist. And we know that's true. We know that the word conspiracy theorist was intentionally used to demonize those who thought that JFK wasn't killed by Harvey Lee Oswald. Of course they're doing that. And now they're conflating the word terrorism to include people who take from welfare. And it's actually a clever trick. And now the people who didn't otherwise care about the terrorists, maybe because they knew that it wasn't really a big risk, now they're still concerned, well, hey, they're also taking money from the government, and that's where I draw the line. And that's the issue we've got now. But I tell you what, we do have to move on. So, Lindsay, that was your topic. If you want the final word, say your piece, and then we'll throw over to Ethan.
No, I've got nothing more to say. That's it.
Ethan, the next topic on the agenda today is Homeland Security. So I was hoping you could take that one away for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. And this expands pretty much exactly from where we just left off, because I discovered this information in an article that was talking about Aussie jihadists that are on the dole. Now, in episode 6 of the Australian Roundtable podcast, after you and I, Jono, had discussed something similar on past episodes before that, I detailed a hidden article that I discovered detailing a move to set up a Department of Homeland Security, which is going to be headed by the Australian Federal Police right here at home. It detailed the potential merging of police, intelligence, customs, and many more government departments to crack down on future so-called terrorist attacks domestically and internationally. Now, we discussed this further after the Sydney siege, with Jono, you predicting that the event could be used as a means, to unite said departments together based on, a lack of monitoring, communication, lack of coherency amongst the divisions in charge of responding to the event, which is just exactly what the articles that we just read out before have been saying ahead of Abbott's speech tomorrow. Now, I discovered an article by the Daily Telegraph, which was released at midnight yesterday, of course, that has now confirmed multiple concerns that we have about this happening. Now, it was in an article entitled Aussie Jihadists Are on the Dole, and as always, we'll leave links at ausroundtable.com for those to go. But as going into the article, I was thinking the exact same thing as everything that we've just discussed about, not only the demonization and the resonation in the mind of fear amongst people, but also that they're going to use this as a way to attack the welfare system. And that's exactly what the article does. It takes aim from New Start to sickness, youth and carers allowance, as well as disability support pension, are all under the firing line after this article had revealed that so-called jihadist terrorists are were on the dole before they left. So I checked out the article, and just as predicted, everything that we had said was there. And it was just an awful thing to read. The Daily Telegraph is always just awful, sensationalist propaganda. But then I discovered a secret part of the article under the heading Security Revamp to Boost Terror Battle. And this was extremely troubling to read. And I mean, it's very troubling because all of our fears are coming true. Quote, ASIO Chief and former Army General Duncan Lewis could become the country's first counter-terrorism czar. Notice how they mentioned the term czar. Under a shake-up of Australia's national security architecture. The federal government is expected to announce next week that it will use the same joint task force model that it used to stop boats to stop terrorism. The Counter-Terrorism Joint Agency Task Force would oversee all spy agencies, including ASIO and ACIS, the Australian Federal Police Counter-Terrorism Unit, as well as Border Protection and Immigration. Senior government confirmed Mr. Lewis was being considered for the job, but no decision has yet been made. The JATF would report directly to the National Security Committee of Cabinet, which is chaired by, of course, our Prime Minister. A review of national security agencies ordered by Prime Minister Tony Abbott last year is believed to have recommended that the JATF model over the creation of an Office of Homeland Security, which was first proposed more than a decade ago. The Daily Telegraph revealed that the government was considering two options to bring all the spy agencies and counter-terrorism forces under one umbrella, and had flagged that former Major General Lewis could be appointed to lead it. But the PM demanded a review of existing intelligence sharing before a final decision is made. Now, tomorrow, Mr. Abbott is expected to announce the creation of the JTAF in his first address to the nation on national security when Parliament resumes on Monday, and he is also expected to announce further tightening of laws to ban extremist groups preaching hatred and promoting terrorism, end quote. Now, I thank the listeners for bearing with me as I read out that in its entirety, but I definitely think it was necessary to do so. So what we've got here is a counter-terrorism joint agency task force overseeing all spy agencies, including ASIO and ACIS, the Australian Federal Police Counter-Terrorism Unit, as well as Border Protection and Immigration. Not only that, it's going to be reporting directly to the National Security Committee, which is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. And not to mention tightening laws to ban extremist groups preaching hatred, the same thing that we have said over and over that is going to be used to target us. Every Australian, every person listening to this show right now, every critical thinker in Australia, they are starting the motions to put this in place. I mean, it doesn't get scarier than that. And all of these things are expected to be announced tomorrow. Johnno, I'll throw back to you first to see what you think about this.
Well, I've got a lot more to say later in the show, so I'm trying to spread the load here. We'll throw that one straight over to you there, Lindsay. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I'm quite concerned because this almost ties in with Jim Stone on his website the other day. He was also talking about the American situation where the Department of Homeland Security now is actually having control over NSA. So it becomes almost like the octopus. It's got its tentacles over everything. And of course, remember, they were the ones who were buying all those billions of bullets and all those coffins. So it scares me that we start using the same names in Australia. I'm not sure where this is going. I'll probably just wait and see and we see exactly what Abbott has to say and see how it works out for the next month or so and see what comes out of it and how they change over time. Okay, back to you.
Look, I'm inclined to agree with that. It's a bit hard to say at this point, but to me it honestly sounds like an Orwellian Ministry of Love. Yeah. I mean, really, that's pretty much what it is. Ministry of Love. It's controlling everything. It's security of the nation and under one roof, and they can get away with whatever they want. I mean, the only people that they're reporting to are the Prime Minister. And look, as we've seen in America, organizations like this have unprecedented power and control, and there's no way to stop them. So I find it quite disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lord Rollo in the live chat says, "Zig, hail, phony Tony. We'll have to start carrying our passport at all time." And that isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. You look at how far we've come just in the last 20 years. The notion that in 10 years more time, we will have to carry papers with us at all time. That's not ridiculous. In fact, it looks like that's exactly where we're headed. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Johnno, and I found this extremely concerning for both the reasons that were in there. One, because we predicted that they were going to do something like this before episode 6. In episode 6, we found the article where they were leaking it to the public that this is something that they're going to take on board, that's something they're going to recommend. We covered that, even though it was buried at the back of mainstream media websites. And now, after all of this time, after all this propaganda, Ms. Abbott is expected, as the article says, tomorrow to announce the creation of the Joint Task Force. joint agency task force, rather. It's unbelievable. And for the second reason, I've been scripting and making a documentary about how they're going to take away our free speech, how they're going to flip the word terrorist on us, how they're going to flip preaching hatred and extremist groups, as David Cameron said, nonviolent extremism, how they're going to flip it, and we're all going to be rounded up into that one category where eventually anyone who critically thinks against the free system is going to be an enemy. And this is what is coming tomorrow, apparently. He said Abbott is going to announce tightening of laws that are going to ban extremist groups preaching hatred. I mean, it doesn't get scarier than this because the wheels are now in motion, Johnno.
Well, I mean, the article that I read earlier about that Islamist group that they want to ban, they openly state that, yeah, this group doesn't even advocate violence. Their biggest crime is not condemning terrorism. Well, listen to our show for 2 hours, and we don't explicitly advocate violence, and we don't condemn terrorism. In fact, we laugh because we don't. I can't speak for you three, but I personally find the whole terrorism thing to be a blatantly laughable boogeyman thing. So I'm not condemning terrorism. In fact, I'm suggesting that most of it's made up. On the basis of the way that they're trying to demonize that Islamist group, they could demonize me and suggest they have to ban me. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to ban me anytime soon, but it's like I always say, the trend is your friend. Look at the trend. Where are we headed right now? And what reason do you have to think that they've come this far, they've come this far, they've come this far, they've taken away this right, on and on it goes? What reason do you have to think that they're going to stop? That's a question I ask people. If they've done this bit by bit, piecemeal, why, in your mind, do you think they're ever going to stop taking away your rights until you have none left? Why do you believe that? I'm not saying you're wrong, but what reason do you have for believing that? And, of course, the people have zero reason. And, Lindsay, you've been around longer than us. You've seen this more than we have. I'll throw that one straight to you.
Yeah, thank you. When you were talking about identification, it's almost like you used to see in the old movies, probably before your time, but they used to have these movies and you'd see the terrible Nazis going around demanding papers off everybody all the time. I had a similar experience. I was in a truck and I was a passenger in the truck. We were pulled up out near Colomulla in Western Queensland, and the policeman wanted identification from me as a passenger. And we had a bit of a to and fro back for this. And in the end, he was going to manhandle me and arrest me. So I gave him the identification, and then I took action against them through the commissioner. And in the end, I finished up having to do freedom of information request, and I found out that their own legal advice in the documents that I received told them they had no right to demand identification from an ordinary person travelling. They have if you're driving a vehicle, but not an ordinary person. And lo and behold, within a week after that, here they are up on Bribie Island demanding identification from young teenagers on the beach. Now, they're doing the wrong thing. They know they're doing the wrong thing, but obviously this is a plan they've got. You will have to carry identification. Anyway, I won't get too wound up about this because it really angers me the way we're heading, and you can see it happening before your eyes. Okay, over to you.
Well, in the live chat, Silver Slave 333, who's been one of our listeners right from the start, he says that a solution is to get a dual passport so that if things go, to quote him, full retard, then you can just get out. One of the problems that we have right now is they're talking about cancelling the passports of dual citizens, and they're saying that if one of your citizens only has one passport, you can't, under international law, take away that passport because then you become stateless. That's illegal under international law. But if he has two passports, you're entitled to revoke the one that you gave him. So the problem we've got now is if you're a dual passport holder, it's easier for them to take away your passport. Now, they're saying that they want to do this to take away the Australian passports of these people going and fighting in the Middle East. But what about the dual passports, Lindsay, of many people who are living here today who pledge allegiance to another nation, a nation that's involved in far more terrorism that's documented than this ISIS group is supposed to have been? I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, I can see that point of view. But then I'll come back one thing further. In 1901, we were all British citizens, or British subjects, not citizens, living in Australia. Now, somewhere between 1901 and now, if I go to Britain, I've got to go through the aliens door. I can't go in as a British subject, even though the Constitution says that we take allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, etc., etc. So there are so many complications in this. They're playing silly buggers with us. They're wheeling and dealing. Whatever suits them at the time is what they say, so they get their own way. That's how I view it. I wouldn't trust anything they do. And when you're talking about taking away the dual citizens, I can see they do that without even the blink of an eyelid, because the rule of law means nothing to these people. Okay, back to you.
Well, when we discuss the government, and that's really what we're talking about here, in the next couple of segments we'll touch on that as well. It's a nice little segue for me to read out another quote from old mate Malcolm X. Quote, "The press is so powerful in its image-making role, it can make the criminal look like he is the victim and make the victim look like he's the criminal. This is the press, an irresponsible press. It will make the criminal look like he's the victim and make the victim look like he's the criminal. If you aren't careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. If you aren't careful, because I've seen some of you caught in that bag, you run away hating yourself and loving the man. While you're catching hell from the man, you let the man maneuver you into thinking that it's wrong to fight him when he's fighting you. He's fighting you in the morning, fighting you in the noon, fighting you at night, and fighting you all in between, and you still think it's wrong to fight him back. Why? The press. The newspapers make you look wrong," end quote. And that was from a speech that he gave back in 1965. So what's that? 50 years ago. That's the publication that he was quoted in. Based on that little quote that I've given you, Ethan, I'll throw it back to you. And this topic that we're discussing of why do people accept this, surely the media is right at the heart of it.
Yeah, definitely, Jono. And, you know, I've analysed the media for a number of years now, especially after being, you know, involved in mainstream media here in Brisbane and then, you know, leaving and going into the alternative media sort of movement that we had at the time, which has now grown into this fantastic community that we have. But I've analysed on tottnews.com, my website, mass media and the manipulation that they have on people and given examples about how they resonate fear into the minds of the people to keep people afraid, to keep them consuming, and then they can manipulate their public perception on that. It's the same as a public perception that dole-bludgers are against you, that dole-bludgers are taking it from you, that dole-bludgers are criminal. The same ideology that terrorists are bad, that terrorism is real, that terrorism, you know, are coming to get you, the boogeyman's around every corner, now joining them together. All of these have been planted in the minds of the people, calculated over time with bombardments of news segments, of sensationalist media coverage, of propaganda and Muslim, you know, ever since the Gulf War and even before that, you know, demonization of Muslim and people in the Middle East. It's just the media. I've always said the media, we're controlled in many facets of our lives, through banking, through pharmaceuticals, you know, through the healthcare system, through everything, through money, but the media is the thing that keeps it all together. The media is the glue that puts all of these control systems and sticks them together, because the media is the one that tells you this is how it's supposed to be and how to think about what it's supposed to be. So I definitely think that the media plays a major part in it, and I've talked to people that disagree about that, but people need to look into it. Look at the power that the media has, and you'll make your own conclusions, Jono.
And that makes a perfect segue into the next topic, the third topic for our domestic segment today, which is the fact that David Hicks was declared innocent. And if you're happy, Ethan, I say we move straight to that topic because it ties into everything that we're talking about. Take it away.
Yeah, no doubt it does, definitely. And so I'll just read out what I've got prepared here, because this was a very enlightening story, but again, it accentuates just the media manipulation that we have in this country. But David Hicks, an Australian who was detained by the United States in Guantanamo Bay from 2001 until 2007, has won his challenge to his terrorism conviction before a military court at a US Navy base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. This is an article from the Sydney Morning Herald that I've taken the information from and made it to my own words. For those that are unaware of Hicks, especially our international listeners, he pleaded guilty in March 2007 to the Guantanamo Military Commission and was prosecuted under the controversial Military Commissions Act of 2006 to providing material support to terrorism. It was a plea bargain in which he spent most of his 7-year sentence and was suspended, and he was allowed to return home by the end of the year. A plea bargain he entered only because he wanted to get away from Guantanamo for all of the horrific acts of torture being committed against him for 5.5 years and the environment that he was in. We've spoke about this before on the show. In 2014, we spoke in depth on this program, as I mentioned, about how an appeals court had ruled that material support is not legally a viable war crime for the Guantanamo court anymore, and prosecutors had to make a campaign against Hicks to make sure that his charge stuck. After that became no longer legally viable, and prosecutors argued that his conviction should stand because he agreed not to appeal as a part of his plea deal, the same plea deal he entered only because he wanted to get out of Guantanamo Bay. He said that on a number of occasions. But thankfully, the argument was rejected on Wednesday in a unanimous decision by the US Court of Military Commission Review. And I'll leave a link to the article for those who want to get a better understanding of the trial and related matters involving it. Now, despite this, David Hicks is obviously still suffering, and I mentioned I can back this up after meeting the man while he was here in Brisbane. Despite that, don't count on our government or media apologising for anything that they have done to this man. In another article by the Sydney Morning Herald, this is what Abbott had to say, quote, "We did what was needed, but look, let's not forget whatever the legalities, and this was essentially a matter for an American court dealing with American law. He was up to no good on his own admission," he said. "I'm not in the business of apologising for the actions that the Australian government take to protect our country. Not now, not ever." Asked if Australia had done enough to help Mr. Hicks, Mr. Abbott said, quote, "We did what was needed." Now that's from another Sydney Morning Herald article. I'll leave that too. Now this ignorance and this arrogance from our government, who were involved heavily in the 9/11 attacks, remember. John Howard was in New York on the day. We've got direct ties with Israel and the United States that carried out these attacks, and the other entities involved, the other government departments that are all involved in this. And this article reinforces this arrogance from the government. It was from The Australian on Thursday, February 19th, entitled "Self-Styled Jihadi David Hicks is no innocent abroad." And there's just a little tiny sentence I want to read out. Quote, "He was on the battlefield in Afghanistan with Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces who were at the time engaged in what was effectively a war against the West, including the US and its allies such as Australia," end quote. Now, all that justification for that argument is centered around is that they were declaring a war against the West, when we know and our listeners know and any person who looks into the evidence knows 9/11 was not carried out as the official story says. It was not a war against the West because the West did it to themselves. So that article that it's a war against the West, completely irrelevant and completely non-factual. And I'll leave with a quote before we get into discussion from Hereward Fenton from Truth News Radio Australia. He spoke on this on social media, and I think it's a fantastic quote. He said, quote, "Unless and until the core lie of 9/11 is exposed, David Hicks will continue to be perceived as an enemy of Australia and the West. His quashed conviction means little to people who see him as an accessory to the murder of 3,000 people in New York and Washington. No, he was supporting Taliban against a foreign invasion. Once you remove 9/11 from the equation, it's obvious that the West started this war, and that's why 9/11 truth remains the key issue of our time." And I have to tend to agree with him there. It doesn't matter what you think of David Hicks defending or helping the Taliban against the West, whether you believe it was justified or not. The fact is that the media, again, manipulation after he has been acquitted of his charges after being tortured for 5.5 years in Guantanamo Bay, has now been acquitted. The media still want to play the game that he was an enemy of the state, which is completely irrelevant once you take 9/11 out of the question. Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, well, we go back to that Malcolm X quote. That's almost exactly what you just said. In that quote, it's exactly it. They will turn everybody into an enemy. Whatever they want to do, they will do. Now, I'll bring up one other thing. Was there ever war declared by the United States against Afghanistan? That I don't know whether it was or not, but that's my first question. The second one is when Australians, Jewish Australians, go and join the Israeli Defence Forces and fight with there, are they not fighting against? I mean, if we get people going over to help an Islamic army fight against somebody who hasn't declared war on them but has encroached upon their territory, how come it's not illegal for or unlawful for Israeli Australians to go and fight with the Israeli army? There's this double standard all the time that concerns me. First of all, the double standard, we go and invade people's countries without declaring war, and secondly, that two groups of Australians. One's terrorised. Oh, they're horrible people. They go and fight against the West. But the other mob, it's all right for them because they're fighting for Israel. I'm really quite confused about how these people sleep straight in bed at night. Their thinking is so crooked.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'll just interject there just for 2 points. You're completely right about the hypocrisy, and it's completely unbelievable. You wouldn't believe it if someone told you this. I always imagine if someone came, you know what I mean, someone from the past came back to see what the world was like these days, someone like Malcolm X, and you told them this, and you told him that these things were happening, and he'd find it hard to believe that the masses have got even more induced since his time where he was campaigning against this. But the first point you made was about declaring war on Afghanistan. And I actually wrote a lengthy report about this, a freelance report, taking into consideration the official story of 9/11, just going along with it. Let's pretend that all of these men with box cutters overthrew the planes and everything happened. 3 buildings with 2 planes. Let's just imagine that. You can't declare war on an ideology, and you can't declare war on a criminal organization. You have to declare war on a nation, and Afghanistan were the nation that was declared war on, but they were declaring war on terror. War on terror is an ideology. There's no definition of terrorism. I've said there's over 92 definitions of terrorism under international law. All of this is completely irrelevant, and this isn't even getting into Iraq, which was completely illegal itself. But the Taliban, the so-called Afghanistan government, agreed. They offered to hand over Osama bin Laden, supposedly, this is the official story, if they provided evidence that he was involved in the attacks, and the US refused and decided to declare war, quote, because they were welcome in there, they were allowed to be there to do this to get Al-Qaeda, which is completely illegal. It's the same thing. If you're declaring war on a criminal organization, which you can't do under international law, criminal organizations need to be trialed in a criminal court, just as the Russian mafia, all of these massive mafias, they're criminal organizations as well. Did you see countries declaring war against criminal organizations? No, we're declaring war against nations that harbor a criminal organization for an ideology. It's completely illegal, and I could ramble on all day about it, but I just wanted to interject that there, Lindsay, because you made a fantastic point.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'll throw it back to you, Johnno.
Yeah, I've got a few comments in the live chat that I want to read out. Out of the Blue, who I think is a new listener, says, that's a great point, Lindsay. And straight behind him, Gary Macantanister says, that's spot on, Lindsay. It's a blatant double standard. So you've got some fans out there, Lindsay, and I have to say that Silver Fox logo is looking fantastic. What do you reckon about that logo there, Ethan?
I think it looks great.
I think it's fantastic. Anyway, back onto the comments. Lord Rollo says that we've been dumbed down. Either you're with the militant clowns or the terrorist clowns. And that's exactly what we're facing right now. And the people who are programmed by television, they actually do find themselves put in a position where they feel they have to make a choice. And this is really the case with just about any controversial topic. I find that if I speak to the average person who is still conditioned, usually by television, but also by academia, they do feel as though it's a dichotomy. Everything's a dichotomy. You either believe in evolution or you believe in Adam and Eve myth. You know what I mean? It's like, well, if you don't believe in evolution, you must believe in the myth. No, what if I don't believe in either of them? Well, you have to believe in one of them. And on just about every topic, they've been conditioned to think they have to make a choice. And of course, which choice do they make? They usually make the choice that they've been conditioned to make. And it's a mindset that a lot of them can't break free of until they get away from the television, because that's what the television is doing day after day. It's setting things up. The coalition of the willing. You're either willing to take on terror or you're not willing. They frame it. And unless you understand how language is used against you, you don't realize that that's exactly what they're doing by saying, oh, we're the coalition of the willing. We're the ones who are going to go and invade these countries in the Middle East because we're the willing. Then it puts your mind, if you don't realize it, in the situation of saying, well, I'm either willing or I'm not willing. But you don't take a step back and think, well, what is it that I'm willing to do? Go and invade a country for what? They haven't fired a bullet on this soil ever. Never. When has Afghanistan ever done anything to Australia? The obvious answer is never. When has Iraq ever done anything to Australia? The obvious answer is never. And of course, they don't really teach First World War history in schools. They certainly didn't teach me at school what really happened. Of course, prior to World War I, there was this thing called the Ottoman Empire. And who went and carved that up? Well, the British Empire, including Australia. We weren't the good guys. So if you go back historically and look at who are the bad guys, it's not just that we've been the bad guys for the last 10 or 15 years. We have historically been the bad guys. And if you watch television, it tells you not only we're the good guys, but if you don't support us, you're the bad guy in your own country for not supporting invading some other country. I'll throw that one straight back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Jono. It's and again, it goes back to the Malcolm X quote. It encompasses everything that we're talking about, and it just seems that everything from the launching of these wars to the propaganda to the keeping us in fear with terrorism to even now with David Hicks being relinquished of his of the burden that he's had for so long of these charges that were completely unjustified, where he was tortured for 5.5 years, and now even the media want to flip that back, and Tony Abbott saying that we did what was required of us to do. It's ridiculous, and it's all because of the media. Again, we've got to go back right to the source. If the media weren't saying this, things would be a lot different, and that's the final point I have to make about this.
Fantastic. Well, it makes the perfect segue. Sorry, Lindsay, I'll let you go, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay. There's only one point I want to make, and that is that what's happened to this man Hicks is a very good lesson for all of us, is that as soon as you give in to them, because you think it's convenient, or you don't want to go through torture, it will be used against you later on. Oh, you agreed. Or you admitted, and it's not just to do with him, but every day on the road when the police pull you up, every day you do something, they're going to use any admission, any compliance you have, they're going to use it against you, and I think people need to keep that in the back of their mind.
Well, Lindsay, Malcolm X once said that power never takes a back step, only in the face of more power, and that's exactly what you're saying right now. You don't just bend over and cop whatever they want to give you, because what are they going to do if you do that? Well, they're going to do exactly what they want to do. You need to stand up to it. And I know I did want to move on, but Ethan, can you repeat for us a story that you told us a few episodes ago about a conversation that you had with Hicks and some of the torture they put him through at Guantanamo? I mean, in particular, the water torture. Do you want to just briefly recap us on that one?
Yeah. Well, we had a discussion when he was up here promoting his book, that he was releasing a book that I have where he talks about some of these methods that he was going through, and he was just having a conversation because there weren't too many people there at the time, and it was so easy to see that he's been shaken up after this, to see that his social interactions, the way that he just the overall being of the person was damaged, not just physically but also mentally and spiritually by being in there for so long. And some of the techniques he said that really distressed him was he was locked in ice cold rooms for days on end, where it would just do unimaginable things on your body. Particularly the worst thing he said that was done to him was the sledgehammer raindrop, where you get tied up almost in a crucifix sort of position and to a wooden board, and they just let one drop of water drop on your head for days on end. And he said after a few days of that, just not sleeping, just being fatigued, no nutrition in there, just awful conditions. After a few days of that raindrop hitting your head in the same spot, it felt like there was a sledgehammer hitting you every time that it went there. And he said that, it was enough to just break any man's mental state. And this is the things that he had to put up with. And now, because he wanted to get away with that, because he entered a plea bargain where he could get out of that, now it's being used against him, just as Lindsay said. And it's appalling to see that our government are continuing on this route, but I didn't expect any different, Jono.
Well, I'll tell you what, that makes a nice little segue into our fourth topic for today, which is that Abbott wants war. So I've got an article I want to read out here. So again, listeners, bear with me. This is from the 21st of February of this year, from News, which is Rupert Murdoch. PM suggested Iraq invasion, the Weekend Australian reports. Quote, Prime Minister Tony Abbott suggested sending 3,500 troops to Iraq so Australia could combat the Islamic State terrorist group alone, a new report has found. A Weekend Australian investigation has found that Mr Abbott pitched the idea at a meeting attended by his Chief of Staff Peter Credlin in Canberra on November 25. The paper says that after he received no resistance from Ms Credlin or other members of his staff, he raised the idea with Australia's military officials. The Weekend Australian report says that Mr Abbott was told that a unilateral push from Australia would make it the only country with troops on the ground in Iraq. The officials told the Prime Minister that it would be disastrous for the 3,500 Australian soldiers to be fighting in Iraq against ISIS without support from the US or NATO. A spokesman for Mr. Abbott told the Weekend Australian, the Prime Minister has consistently said that the Australian government will continue to talk to the government of Iraq and to our coalition partners about what Australia can usefully do to make the world a safer place and to make Australia a safer country. The reported suggestion by Mr. Abbott to send Australian troops to Iraq is likely to call into question his judgment, having just survived a motion for a leadership spill, end quote. Now, I've got a couple of points to make on this one. The first point is that Abbott's finished. Whether it's the leaking against him from within or a complete fabrication from the Murdoch papers, this is more proof that his days are numbered. And you heard it here first on the Australian Roundtable podcast back in November 2015. Murdoch turned on him by November 2015, and here we are 4 months later, and it's pretty clear that this guy's toast. But the second point is, what does it say about Australia if this news turns out to be true, that we could have any politician, let alone a Prime Minister, who wants to unilaterally declare war on ISIS and send thousands of troops to Iraq? What does it say about the state of our nation? I know I laugh about this, but it's like I always say, you can either laugh or cry. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah. I've got another section I want to come to later where we've got the new government in Queensland already doing the same sort of thing. Oh, they decide something. So I'll deal with that when I come to it. But it just scares me. We keep coming back to this thing where they all think that they're elected dictators. They don't realise that they're only representatives of the people. And that, I think, comes to the heart of the whole problem.
You need to make sure you throw to someone there, Lindsay. Ethan, what say you?
Oh, sorry.
No, I completely agree with Lindsay, and it does scare me because, again, they don't think that they are, well, they've manipulated us into us not believing anymore that they are representatives of the people. People look at them as a form of authority. Everyone, I'm sure every single person in terms of their subconscious in the masses thinks of a politician in terms of a figure of authority, because of the power that this person has these days, but they don't realize they are representatives of the people. They work for us, and that's a thing that people need to be empowered by and understand, is that they work for us. And going back to what you said, Johnno, it's just that mentality that is fueling this, and Abbott's just not going to stop, and it's going to get even worse with all of these things that he's initiating or wanting to initiate. Like, it's just come out now. Imagine if it happened. It's just unbelievable, Johnno.
Yeah, and I guess going back to this idea of war, I mean, let's take a step back here. We're talking about the Prime Minister of this country today, Australia, a middle power at best, the Prime Minister discussing the possibility of sending 3,500 of our troops over to Iraq unilaterally, even without the US and NATO. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that if you read it in The Onion, you'd say, well, come on, you have to mix in a little bit of truth. But this actually is the truth in a Murdoch newspaper, a pro-coalition newspaper. This is what's being printed. People should be apoplectic. Now, you're sitting over there, Tristan, and I can see that you're nodding your head. You've been a little bit quiet. You might not follow this kind of stuff as closely as we do, but just as you're a taxpayer, you have a full-time job, you're a voter now. What do you think about everything that you've just heard?
I think it's quite disturbing that a single man and his cabinet can declare war with 3,500 people, which, as you mentioned before, is kind of like a joke. What I'm interested in is to how he's going to justify these sorts of things as well and convince the people. I'm interested to see where this new Homeland Security comes into play, because that'll basically be the Prime Minister's play toy to come up with all sorts of information behind the scenes to justify these sorts of invasions. And look, we've been lied to before about going to war, and people are pretty accustomed to believing the government for these sorts of things. And what scares me is that people will be readily available to just jump at the gun, figuratively and literally, to do this, because we've been through this situation before with little resistance.
Yeah, and look, in the live chat, Robert Alexander says, Rhodes Scholar Tony, what did he learn? I'm not sure if Robert Alexander means the double meaning that is there, but let's not forget he's a Rhodes Scholar, and if you look into the history of Cecil Rhodes, why he left behind the money that he did for the Rhodes Scholarship, you'll understand, actually, it looks like Tony Abbott learned exactly what he was supposed to learn. He's part of a system that is designed to do just this. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, exactly. And there was something during the week about the number of people who were trained at Jesuit schools as well. So you've got a double bunger here. I'll throw back to you on that.
Yeah, indeed. Now we've spent an hour on the domestic topic and segment, and we do still have a few topics to get through. So if you guys are happy, I'll leave that discussion there. We need to move on to the next one, Ethan, and that is drones for Australia. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. And this is an episode where people are enjoying my voice thoroughly, I'm sure. But I've got another segment here to read out, and it's drones in Australia, and I'll just get into some of the background that I've prepared here, as usual, to add some context for the people listening at home. So this is following on from the past 2 weeks here on the Australian Roundtable, where we have broken down key components of the Orwellian nightmare that is slowly surrounding us. Examples, Google looking to microchip human brains, which, Lindsay, I went and looked that up afterwards in depth about Google wanting to microchip us, and that is some scary stuff, brother.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Smart meters we spoke about, you did a brilliant piece on that as well. State spying and historical context on our digital enslavement and much more we spoke about here on the show. And this article that I discovered this week is a perfect catalyst to bring up yet another major factor of this draconian system. Now, I tried to keep this short, but it is vitally important. For the past few years here in Australia, especially since the massive increase to defense spending and military operations by the United States after Obama was elected to the dictator's throne, establishment authorities here at home have been slowly but methodically introducing incremental steps to set up a surveillance grid monitored by drones. And now it seems they are ramping up their agenda on a massive scale. An article published in the Brisbane Times by Philip Dorling, who I've praised on a number of occasions for his fantastic work on national security. It's entitled, "Federal Police Want to Use Military Drones to Spy on Australians from the Sky." Quote, "Military drones should be used for surveillance over Australia," an Australian Federal Police submission to a parliamentary inquiry says. So immediately we discover that a parliamentary inquiry has already been made and submitted by the AFP for this to become a reality. Keep that in mind. Continuing on, the AFP said the deployment of Australian Defence Force unmanned aerial vehicles would be, quote, "a unique advantage in the conduct of covert surveillance in Northern Australia." And the article goes on to speak about the previous work that the AFP has done with the Australian Defence operations, the Australian Defence Force, and how it will support domestic law enforcement operations here at home. Now, the cover story that they're using to justify this action, and again, this is an article calling for drones to surveil Australians from the sky. This is unbelievable. But the cover story they're using to justify this is that there are criminal groups committing illicit smuggling in the Northern Territory. And that may very well be the case. I don't know. What I do know, though, is that the solution isn't being suggested as drones for no reason at all. It's for a reason, and they have been wanting this for a very long time, and TOTTnews.com has been following this agenda since the inception. It started with US drones bombing, Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Libya, and others, those atrocious war crimes that Obama, who won the Nobel Peace Prize while committing these acts, carries out on a regular basis. It came publicly to Australia in the form of a senior Australian Defence Force officer revealing the details of how the RAF deploys Israeli-owned drones for battlefield surveillance and to target anti-government Islamic fighters in Afghanistan. Jonathan McMullen's his name, said in an ABC article entitled "The Kill Chain, Australia's Drone War," Australia is, quote, "just buying hours on the Heron drones from a Canadian company that in turn leases them from IAI, the Israeli Aerospace Industries, which is wholly owned by the Israeli government." It gets worse. Once this was revealed, the Australian government began to normalise drones in Australia, announcing the test flight of BAE Systems' $190 million drone Taranis, which is named after the Celtic god of thunder, which can attack targets across continents, automatically dodge missiles, and other efforts to bring it down and independently identify targets. It can refuel in midair and carry weapons including laser-guided bombs and missiles. And I'll leave articles to all of these so you can see. But the final part is it gets worse again. The Snowden leaks revealed that Pine Gap, one of our primary spy bases, has played a key role in the United States' controversial drone strikes involving targeted killing of Al-Qaeda and Taliban chiefs. Former personnel at the Australian American base described to the Sydney Morning Herald that the facility's success in locating and tracking Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders and other insurgent activities in Afghanistan and Pakistan is, quote, outstanding. So this is unbelievable stuff. And since then, we've been bombarded with the normalization of drones for pool safety. We've spoke about that, Lindsay. Surveillance during the recent G20 here in Brisbane is what they used. And now, almost a year ago to the date, the first article where they released, hey, we're going to use drones to patrol our border. So that's a generalized context of drones here in Australia. They're very prevalent here in Australia at the moment. As we've seen, we've got advanced drones that can do amazing things. We helped the US drone bomb in these countries where it started, and now they wanted drones, with the normalization of drones, to patrol our borders and to spy from us from the sky. It's scary stuff, Johnno.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I've made the point a number of times, we all have, I think, that one of the reasons why we love to have international listeners is because, in a sense, the United States, Canada, ourselves, Britain, and New Zealand, the five of us are all in this together. And in some ways, we're ahead of them when it comes to the taking away of gun ownership rights or what have you. In other ways, other countries are ahead of us, but we're all headed to the same end destination, and it's not a good one. And on that note, I want to read out another quote from our mate Malcolm X. He says, "We need to expand the civil rights struggle to a higher level, to the level of human rights. Whenever you're in a civil rights struggle, whether you know it or not, you are confining yourself to the jurisdiction of Uncle Sam. No one from the outside world can speak out in your behalf as long as your struggle is a civil rights struggle. Civil rights comes within the domestic affairs of this country," end quote. And the point that he was making was, when you're fighting an oppressive government, you're all in this together. We have an oppressive government that's getting these drones to come for us. If they get through with that, well, guess who they'll go for next? It'll be Canada, it'll be the United States, and vice versa. So if we're trying to stand up against the use of government, use of drones, we're not just doing that for Australia. We don't want to see drones here or anywhere, because it's bad news for all of us. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm concerned. I know there was one case in America where it was suggested that there'd been a huge gas explosion in a house. And later on, people were saying, oh, no, that was a drone had hit that house with some form of weapon. And that's what concerns me. Because when we were first talking, or you were talking about this and I was listening, I'm thinking, well, how does that affect me? And then I thought, yeah, that could quite easily affect us. We get back to metadata. Okay, they've connected me to you, to Ethan, etc. Who's to say they won't come and blow your house away, or blow my house away, or whatever? And that's what concerns me.
No, I completely agree. And in the articles that I'm going to link, because everything that I talked about was a generalization, and there are users in the chat speaking of other examples of drones here in Australia. But in that article, especially Kill Chain, the Australia's drone war, there is a timeline of just what we've done and what we're capable of. So, Lindsay, your fears can easily be justified by the precedents that they have set, and I think it's unbelievable. Tristan, we've spoke about drones before. I'm interested to get your perspective on what you think and where we're headed.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I'm kind of scared with the combination and ties of that and artificial intelligence. Also, you mentioned metadata, and also these chips that Google's putting into us. It's becoming easier and easier to find us now. What if there is a script written in the future that allows artificial intelligence to automatically determine whether or not you're a threat and kill you on the spot without any human intervention? And look, I don't think that's too far away. I think people have put a lot of trust in technology and the automation behind these things, and that's something that really terrifies me, is putting moral issues like that into the hands of a computer without letting anyone know. Interesting point you made before about the house blowing up is nobody really knew what it was, and that's the same thing that's happening here. Is if someone gets killed by this drone, the government doesn't need to say that it was a drone that killed that person. That person just died, and I don't know. To me, that's quite a scary thought of people just dropping or disappearing.
Well, that's not as crazy as it sounds, because that's similar to what they're doing in foreign countries as we speak. And that's the whole point. If you think it's okay for the American government to go and drone innocent people, killing collateral damage in the Middle East, if you think that's okay, then why isn't it okay for them to do that to you? And why don't you think they eventually will do that to you? So when you say, oh, they might eventually use drones to indiscriminately kill people, that might sound crazy. It's not crazy. It's happening as we speak, but it's just that our governments are doing that to other people Well, why do you think that you're so special? What, because you vote one way or that you earn them tax dollars? You're just one person. If it comes time for them to do it, they wouldn't think twice about taking you out. And the fact that we stand, well, not, I'd like to think none of us are our listeners, but many people stand idly by and don't speak out about the fact that our governments or our allies' governments are droning people literally as we speak in other countries. We're giving tacit consent to them doing that to our children in a generation's time. Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah. There's very little I've got to add to that. I think we've pretty much made some very good points there. I think the listeners would certainly have a broad idea of what our views are on it by now. So I'll let it go back to you.
Fantastic. All right. Well, guys, we are running way behind schedule. That's my fault. I should be on top of this. But what we'll do is we're going to end this. I mean, this has been 5 segments, but they all tie in together. What we'll do is we'll go around the room and then we'll move on to other topics. I'll start with you, Ethan. Any final thoughts before we move on?
No. I tried to keep that article as short as I could due to time, but it is vitally important, and that's the message I want to resonate to people. This is important because, as everything we've just spoke about, and the Orwellian nightmare comes in multiple facets, as we've spoke about on previous episodes. Google and microchips, state surveillance, smart meters, all of this, but drones are a vital key, and they're going to play a vital part in this new world order system. So we need to identify it, we need to become educated, and we need to alert people. So please go check out the links I leave at ozroundtable.com after this episode, and spread the word with people. That's all I've got to say.
Well said, and we'll move over to you there, Lindsay. Any final thoughts on this general discussion of corrupt governments and what they're doing to us and to other people around the world? Any final thoughts?
No, the only thought I've got is that these have been my beliefs for a long time, but now they're becoming, it's almost like the pointed end of the stick, because you're actually seeing things that they can do. Whereas before we were looking at Russia or whatever and saying, well, they're going to do that to us eventually. But now you can actually see the smart meters, the metadata, the drones. You see where it's going very quickly, so it sort of focuses the attention. That's all I've got to say.
And you've been rather quiet over there on your debut on the Australian Roundtable podcast. Tristan, I'll throw to you. Any general thoughts on the topics that have come up so far?
Look, I'm very interested to see, as you're saying, the sharp point of the stick. I'm interested to see where they'll take this. I feel like I've got a lot of things that they haven't told us about, and I'm a little bit disturbed, and very interested to see what will happen soon.
And I'll finish off by reading out another quote from Malcolm X. He says, "I'm non-violent with those who are non-violent with me. But when you drop that violence on me, then you've made me go insane, and I'm not responsible for what I do. Anytime you know you're within the law, within your legal rights, within your moral rights, in accord with justice, then die for what you believe in. But don't die alone. Let your dying be reciprocal. This is what is meant by equality. What's good for the goose is good for the gander." Now, when you hear rhetoric like that, you can see exactly why I wasn't taught about this guy in school. Because look what he's talking about. He's saying if you really believe that you're on the side of good and you believe that your government's on the side of evil, then you know what you have to do. And I guess it sort of ties into this topic of having drones, because at least if they want to use foot soldiers to come to people's houses, then they have to send people out. But once they've got their hands on the drones, then all of a sudden that's one less reason they have not to go ahead with taking out dissidents. And some of the stuff that Malcolm X says is so prescient. Now, that quote that I just read out is a good example. I omitted the fact that he was specifically talking there about the word, and he uses the word Negroes. You don't even let to use that word anymore, but 50 years ago, people did use that word. It shows how far our language is being destroyed as part of the thought police, political correctness. But every now and then with these quotes, I will omit certain parts, but it's the essence of what he's saying that I'm getting at here, and I think it applies to all of us. We do have to move on. Before we do, I've got a couple of quotes I want to read out. Robert Alexander says that if you were to force Gina Reinhardt to send the 457s back home, then we'll have more jobs for Australians. This is going back to the earlier discussion that we had about Dole-bludgers and what have you. And I'm so glad to see people saying this, pointing out the fact that, hey, people are going without jobs here, but we're importing people. How does this make sense? Well, who's benefiting? Gina Reinhardt. Who's she? Multi-billionaire who used to own part of Fairfax. Of course she's getting away with it. More Australians wake up to that, and things will change very quickly. He also wants to know on the topic of drones, when it comes to these drone flights, can you use your flybys, Lindsay? That's an inside joke for those who were listening a couple of weeks ago. And then Blinky Cat says that his brother bought himself a drone for Christmas and crashed into a tree the same day. Yes, and I didn't realize that so many people were buying drones, but even individuals are buying drones now. And I guess if you think it's okay for individuals to own drones and spy on their neighbors, then why would you have a problem with the government doing the same? Which is why I have a personal objection to I wouldn't go and buy a drone and fly it to my neighbors' properties, and I'd like to think that those who are buying these drones are respecting each other's rights. But I guess, living in the world that we do, many people wouldn't, and they're never going to stand up for their own rights because they don't believe in other people's rights. We do have to move on to the next topic. It's a little bit different to what we've been discussing, but it's one that's important, Lindsay. So I'm going to throw to you right now to discuss fluoride in water. Yes,
thank you. This also was yesterday's Courier Mail. There's just a small segment, but it caught my eye. And I'll quote it. It was called Teething Problems. And quote, thousands of children under 4 are being admitted to hospital each year to have rotten teeth removed. And in some cases, all their teeth pulled. Now, my first question, and probably my only question, is why the hell are we all being poisoned with industrial waste fluoride with its lead, cadmium and arsenic in it if the sole purpose it was placed in the drinking water is not working? And that sole purpose is protecting children's teeth. They make no pretense about it, the so-called authorities, being of any use to adults. It's only for children, and obviously it's not working. So anyway, it's just one of my pet hobby horses, this fluoride or anti-fluoride, and I thought I'd bring that up. To me, it's almost like a bit like vaccinations, where people say to me, "Oh, yeah, your kid's got to be vaccinated," and my attitude was, well, if yours is vaccinated, what are you worried about? It's the same with the fluoride. If you've got fluoride, how come your teeth are rotting? So obviously something's not right here. Okay, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, I know that this is a hobby horse of Ethan's. You've looked into this a lot further than most. Do you want to pass on your thoughts to us now?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jono. Yeah, Lindsay, we've all spoken about this on previous episodes quite in depth, and one thing we didn't touch on was that fluoride has been proven to be a major cause of fluorosis and teeth problems. Just fluoride in the water itself has been caused to be the problem, one of the major problems of this that it's supposedly supposed to, prevent. And I just think it's unbelievable that we still have to be debating about fluoridation, and in this 2015, and we're still debating about it. You know what I mean? Councils are still fighting. Tremendous activists are still fighting to try and get it out of council city water supplies. Which, as we've said, this new government that gets in might make a move to, make it mandatory again. Who knows? It's just unbelievable what's happening with this, and that we still have to argue this because the science is undeniable. The science is completely undeniable from what it does to IQ levels, from what it does to everything. And there was actually a post on social media the other day that I saw about fluoride, which tied in, again, here we go, tying two different things in. It took Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, the anti-vaccination campaigner that was banned from Australia, but her shows were cancelled. She wasn't allowed to come here to speak about anti-vaccination. They took her and they talked about his name slips me at the moment. I don't have the details in front of me, but he's Cornell or something like that. He's a doctor that has done tremendous work and has come over here to Australia on numerous occasions to try and debate doctors. He's coming over here again to do more talks, and they've tied them together in this article saying that anti-vaccination, meet the sister conspiracy theorists of anti-vaccine campaigners, anti-fluoride. And someone said, why, if it's for our teeth, why are we ingesting it into our major organs, and why is it coming through us in the shower? And the response that people were saying were, don't you understand that it passes your teeth on the way down your throat? Like, this is unbelievable. People are so ignorant to this fact, even though the science has been proven, just undeniably proven that it's bad for us and not beneficial for us. And even if you think it's beneficial for us, your decision shouldn't dictate the dosage that other people get and the mandatory substance on them as well. I'm rambling on here, but Jono, that's the main point. Is just I can't believe there's still ignorance, especially with the lowest things such as fluorosis.
Yeah, and in the live chat, there's a conversation going on about how do people try and avoid it. And one of the commenters said that when he was a kid in the 70s, his parents used to give him fluoride tablets until one day the TV announced that the fluoride tablets were actually the cause of fluoride poisoning and led to the white spots on the teeth. And then Silver Slave makes the point, well, despite the fluoride poisoning, you still made it here. As in, even though many of us when we were young did get, doused with the fluoride, if you like, It hasn't stopped everybody from thinking, and some of us still managed to get through it. I guess the issue for me is if you took our conversation about war and the horrors of war, there are so many people out there, even the ones who were conditioned by TV, who would still agree with us. Yeah, war's a horrible thing. We shouldn't be droning people overseas. We shouldn't be droning them here. The moment that we talk about fluoride, though, they'd say, oh, well, you're crazy, because they've been so conditioned. And I don't think it's ignorance about fluoride. I wish it were ignorance, because ignorance you can fix up. This is outright brainwashing. They have been brainwashed and conditioned into believing that anyone who thinks that fluoride is bad for you is crazy. And this is the point I always make. I used to think it was simply a matter of, oh, people just don't know the truth, and if you show them the truth, everything will be fine. It's so much worse than that. We're dealing with people who have been brainwashed, and so far as I'm aware, there's never been a device in the recorded history of humans that is so able to brainwash people passively. They just turn it on, and there it is. And whether it's a movie like Dr. Strangelove, 50 years ago Dr. Strangelove was released, where the guy who thought fluoride was bad for you was the crazy guy who wanted to nuke people, right through today on TV shows, the people who question fluoride are the crazy ones. They've got it in people's minds now that not only is fluoride good for you, but anyone who questions it isn't just wrong, they're crazy. And this is the biggest hurdle that we have, is that they've conditioned people not just not to question, but to be scared of those who do. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I've done a fair bit of research into it over the years, and we go back far enough, and nearly everything else is shaped like a pyramid. So you've got a big base of evidence, and it goes up. When I followed the fluoride back, it all went back to, it was if the pyramid was inverted. So it all went back to one thing. So that everything today that we've been told about it actually goes back to one group, and they were the aluminium smelters who'd been killing cattle in the fields and what have you. And so they come up with this wonderful idea that we'll convince people it's good for them, we'll put it through their kidneys instead of us having to pay to have it disposed, etc. Anyway, it goes on like that. Now, the other thing that I think the fellow that Ethan was trying to think of was Dr. Connett, who was coming out here. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. I mean, we can go on and on and on, and if anybody believes that we're not going to convince them, and if they're on our side, they know what we're talking about.
Maybe you can help me out here, guys, because I'm not so familiar with this subject of fluoride. I always like to ask a question, Qui bono, or who benefits? What's the benefit of the government putting this in our water?
Well, no, you go ahead, Lindsay.
No, just what I was just saying. If you go back far enough, the fluoride that's put in our water is a way of them disposing of a toxic substance through the kidneys of the population. So you convince you it's good for you, we put this toxic poison through your kidneys, and we don't have to pay to dispose of it. And the stuff we get is not pure. It comes out of scrubbers in fertilizer factories or aluminium factories or whatever, and that's what the problem. When we go back far enough in America, it was killing all the cattle in the field for kilometres around the place, and they were being sued. So then, all right, we've got to stop emitting it, and what are we going to do with the waste? Well, we'll convince the people that they need to put it through their kidneys, and yeah, that's all. I'll go back to you.
Yeah. Well, do you think there's anything else that they'd be doing that with us? So fluoride might be one thing. Have you come across any other waste disposal things that you think they might be feeding us?
Not that I can put my hands on now. I'd have to go away and think about that. I'm sure there would be. I mean, they don't just do things by once. They always do 2 or 3 or whatever. I'd have to go away and think about that. Okay.
Ethan, we'll throw to you there, mate. I know you've got an answer for Tristan's original question about who benefits from this. What's your thought? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, just to expand on what Lindsay said, that did used to happen back in the day. That's what used to happen. It was a terrible burden for a number of communities and farming industries and whatnot. And the cost was about $7,000 as of 2011 per barrel to dump this byproduct. This is hydrofluoric acid, which is fluoride passed off. To bury it, it would cost $7,000 a barrel. So they said there's no cost if you distribute it through water under the guise of it being beneficial for your teeth. Now, one example of who benefits, there's over 43 nationally and internationally published studies that have shown that there is a correlation between fluoridation in the water in town populated areas as opposed to towns that don't have fluoride, that it decreases their IQ levels. It decreases their IQ levels significantly. And I'll leave a link to this. All 42 studies have been categorized on fluoridealert.org, I believe it is, for you to go see. The same doctor we're speaking about, Lindsay, has categorized those on that website. And that's just one benefit of who benefits, because when the IQ decreases, and particularly, I know I'm a spiritual guy, I've spoke to you about spirituality before, it particularly fluoride attacks the pineal gland, which has been described obviously as the third eye that you have to see for consciousness, for awakening to a new reality. So just as they've banned LSD, just as they've banned all of these psychotropic drugs, which would make you see things a different way than this constructed reality, fluoride also attacks the pineal gland, decreases IQ, and does terrible things. It sticks into your body. There's just so many things that it can do to a human being that only benefit the elite, because it disempowers free humanity and doesn't make us capitalize on our full potential. Tristan, that's my answer.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Well, I've got to say, we do need to move on to the next topic. We're a bit behind schedule, but on this topic of fluoride, I can see in the comments there are lots of people who know that fluoride's bad for them. They're using iodine tablets to avoid it. They are fully aware of the fact that this stuff isn't there to help them. It's there to harm them in one way, shape, or form. And it leads me to my next quote from Malcolm X, who says that once you change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Once you change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. Once you change your attitude, it changes your behavior pattern, and then you go into some action. As long as you've got a sit-down philosophy, you'll have a sit-down thought pattern. And as long as you think that old sit-down thought, you'll be in some kind of sit-down action. And the relevance that I think that quote has to this discussion is the fact that if you know that fluoride is not good for you, the first thing you've got to do is stop drinking it. Once you've done that, then you can start looking at ways to lobby other people to stop drinking it, and hopefully we can all get each other off the fluoride. I mean, the point is, it's one thing to get off the fluoride yourself, but if you truly believe that this stuff is bad for you and it's bad for the rest of us, then it's morally incumbent on you. I don't like using the word morals, but it is incumbent on you to then help other people, not just to see that, but to get this stuff out of the water. If they want to continue to use fluoride, let them buy it and put it in their own water. But there's a whole bunch of people out there who have no idea how bad this stuff is for them. That's why what we need to do is to get the government to take this stuff out of the water, and then those who do care about this and want it, they can have it. Put the fluoride in. We need to get the government to stop putting this stuff in the water in the first place, because the vast majority of the masses out there are completely oblivious to how bad this stuff is for them. And what's more, they've been trained to think that those of us who do know that it's bad for us are the crazy ones. So get it out of the water, get the government to stop putting it in the water, and then we can start making some change. But we do need to move on to the next topic. This is the final one for the domestic segment. We're way behind schedule, but this is an important update. This is to do with the Royal Commission into sex abuse. Now, 2 weeks ago, I put together a feature piece on the developments concerning the Royal Commission into institutional responses to sex abuse currently underway here in Australia. Basically, for 2 years now, a Royal Commission has been underway in this country to investigate systematic child sex abuse and the covering up thereof in institutions such as the Catholic Church. Only in the past month or two has the Royal Commission turned its attention to Jewish institutions, and some of the revelations have been scandalous, to say the least. This included the fact that Sydney's head rabbi admitted to knowing in advance that a member of a school at which his own son was a director had been accused of child sex abuse and was planning to flee the country immediately as a result, and yet this same head rabbi failed to notify the authorities, and he admits to this. The same head rabbi, Mr. Feldman, was awarded an Order of Australia medal by our then Prime Minister John Howard in the same year that this all took place. Incredible stuff, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Well, anyway, I've got an update on this one. This is from the ABC, 17 February of this year. Rabbi Mia Klugant, Australia's most senior rabbi, resigns after damning testimony at Royal Commission. And I apologise if my pronunciation is wrong. I'm doing my best here. Quote, Australia's most senior rabbi, Mia Shlomo Klugant, has resigned as president of the Organisation of Rabbis of Australasia after a damning stint in the witness box at the Royal Commission into child sex abuse. Rabbi Klugant gave evidence on Friday and was forced to admit he had sent a text message to a newspaper editor calling the father of an abuse victim a lunatic who neglected his children. The message referred to Zephaniah Wax, father of yeshiva community whistleblower Manny Wax. The admission was made after the Wax family lawyer confronted Rabbi Klugant. At first, Rabbi Klugant said he could not recall sending the text, but then admitted he sent it to the editor of the Australian Jewish News, Zeddy Lawrence, on February 3. Mr. Wack's son Manny was molested by convicted pedophile David Hicks. Mr. Wax told the commission he renounced the ultra-Orthodox Chabad movement after the family was persecuted for going public about the abuse. The text message from Rabbi Klugan to a newspaper editor read, "Zephaniah Wax is killing us. Zephaniah is attacking Chabad. He is a lunatic on the fringe, guilty of neglecting his own children. Where was he when all this happened?" When the message was first raised by the Wax family lawyer, Rabbi Klugan had just said he did not approve of shifting the blame onto the parents of child abuse victims. At first, he said he could not recall sending a message to Mr. Lawrence, but admitted it after the message was read out in its entirety. Manny Wax immediately called for Rabbi Klugan's resignation and accused him of being involved in a long-going campaign of intimidation and harassment of himself and his family. "It's been very difficult to prove until now," Mr. Wax said. Mr. Wax recently moved his family to Europe as a result of ongoing harassment, and his parents have left Melbourne for Israel. End quote. Now, the article speaks for itself, and there's more information in the article, including the fact that Klugan has since apologized to the family who were victims of sex abuse and then intimidation of going public about it. The last line from the article is the interesting part. Quote, "Figures from Australia's broader Jewish community have called for more resignations and a watchdog to be set up since details of Yeshiva's response to child abuse allegations were aired at the commission," end quote. And this was one of the aspects that we touched upon last week and the week before. The fact that these things have been kept so quiet, swept under the rug in the Orthodox Jewish community, largely because of their ancient tradition of Mizara, not informing on fellow Jews to secular authorities. It took for a royal commission, which has powers above and beyond that of regular investigations, for these kinds of matters to come out publicly. And I think this says a lot about how little most of us know about a community which, despite comprising only a small percentage of the total population of this country, is so prominent in its influence and sway on public life. And on that note, Lindsay, I'll throw straight to you.
Yeah, thank you. The only comment I had on this was I noticed in the Courier Mail during the week, I think it might have been Thursday, something anyway, that we were mentioning about this how I'm trying to think of the suitable word. Hypocritical it was for them to be calling for forgiveness for pedophiles, you know, that they might have done something 40 years ago or whatever, when we were saying that their basic creed was never forgive and never forgive, when they were referring to camp guards or whatever, you know, SS guards. And it was almost spooky that having spoken about that last weekend in the Courier Mail, here's a story about two 93-year-old SS camp guards being put to trial again in Europe. And I thought there's just so much of this going on, and you couldn't pick that this would coincide the week after we had it on the podcast. I'll give it back to you.
Straight over to you there, Ethan.
Yeah, it seemed that a third party wanted to attack my computer with a Trojan there, so I missed the first half of that explanation there, Jono. Can you give me just a summarised context of what you were talking about?
Oh, well, basically, this whole topic of the Royal Commission into sex abuse, another person has resigned, and he has admitted that he sent a message to a newspaper editor saying that the father of a kid who was abused in the school, and that's not disputed that the kid was abused, when this father decided to come out publicly about it, then this rabbi, this chief, whatever his name was, I've put my papers down there, but this guy basically said, instead of dealing with it, I will just tell the Jewish newspaper that this guy's a lunatic, he's on the fringe, he's a neglectful father, to further ostracize him from the community and to further intimidate him from telling the truth about what was going on. And like I said, what's fascinating about this is, up until this Royal Commission, people like me had no idea this was going on. We knew about the Catholics. I mean, that's on the news all the time, that the Catholics are child molesters and all, not all of them obviously, but certain elements within that organization, not just doing it but covering it up. We knew about that. We've known about that for a long time. But it took for a Royal Commission, which itself took almost 2 years to get onto the topic of Jewish schools, for us to have any idea about this. And someone like myself, I only learnt about Mizara, this policy of not informing on fellow Jews, a few weeks ago when I was doing research for the segment. I had no idea up until that. And then when you contrast that with the fact that most Australians have heard the whole oh, Muslim terrorists want to blow you up so they get 70 virgins. We've all heard of that nonsense, right? We've all got that idea in our heads, whether or not we believe it. But how many of us know, oh, by the way, at the meantime, if a Jew knows another Jew has broken the law, he's not allowed to report on him because of Messiah? How many of us know about that? And I tell you what, because you were here for the whole readout there, Tristan, I know this is a topic that you haven't spent much time on, but just as a regular person who works, pays his taxes, likes to think about things, what's your opinion on what I've just said?
Well, the thing is, as you mentioned before, we know very well about the atrocities that the Catholic Church puts forth and does, but I don't think that a lot of people are aware of what's happening with the Jew situation. And look, I'm really interested to see the response of the Australian public furthermore onto the subject, because they've been protected for a while now, and hopefully with this exposed chief rabbi resigning and whatnot, that people will become a little bit more curious as to what is actually going on behind the scenes in these Jewish societies, and maybe expose more of what's actually happening.
Yeah, and that's the point that we make, is that, I mean, we've got no evidence that this is widespread, but we never would get the evidence because they'd never tell us. It took for a royal commission, which compelled the chief rabbis to come out.
Exactly.
And so we've discussed on previous episodes how the head rabbi of Sydney and his son, who was one of the head rabbis of New South Wales, of course, Sydney being our largest city by population, New South Wales our largest state by population, it took for them to be compelled to give evidence to the royal commission for us to have any idea about this. So the logical inference is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'll throw that one over to you there, Ethan.
Yeah, no, you made some good points, Jono. And again, it goes back to what Lindsay said earlier about, the hypocrisy and the manipulation about how we're only just finding out about this now, yet we all know about Muslim extremism and all of that nonsense that's being fed to us. Again, it's the same just as dual citizenships, as Lindsay spoke about, and it's ironic how it just has to come from the same country and the same group of people that are doing this every single time. And out of the blue, said in the comments just before, Jews are notorious for it too, Jono. And it just seems like we've said on previous podcasts, we've broken this down on a number of occasions. We're not attacking the Jewish community, we're not attacking Jewish people in general, but we're attacking who is the enemy to free humanity. And most of the time, it seems that the Zionist lobby and these Jewish lobby groups are the ones responsible for it. And this is just another example of how we are completely manipulated to avoid questioning anything that involves these people, and it's just unbelievable stuff.
Some of the comments in the live chat, I don't want to repeat live on the show, but they are an absolute laugh. And Lord Rollo, that's a good one. I'm not going to repeat that on the show. By the way, we're up to about 56 people watching the show live right now, so thank you to all you people in the comment section. I'm writing down the good ones as we go. What we're going to have to do, let me repeat that. What I'm going to have to do here, guys, is move on to the international segment, because we're about 30 minutes behind schedule. So if you guys are cool with that, we're going to move on to it right now. And it's a topic that's not so far removed. This is an update on the Vicar who questioned Israel's involvement in 9/11. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I covered the story of a church vicar in England who got into some serious trouble for posting a link to his Facebook account, which led to a website detailing evidence to suggest that Israel was involved in 9/11. Now, he was labeled anti-Semitic for posting that link, and I pointed out on the episode a few weeks ago that whether or not it's true that Muslims were behind 9/11, it is not anti-Islamic to suggest that 19 Muslims with box cutters were responsible for 9/11. Accusing Muslims of being responsible for 9/11 might be juvenile, it might fly in the face of all common sense and the laws of physics themselves, it might be the domain of only the TV-programmed fools who can't think for themselves, but it is not anti-Islamic, nor is accusing Israel of being behind 9/11 anti-Semitic, unless, of course, the term anti-Semite has indeed morphed, as many believe, from describing somebody who hates Jews to somebody who Jews hate. Well, I have an update on that story. This is from the Daily Mail, 10 February 2015. Priest banned from using social media sites for 6 months after posting anti-Semitic comments claiming Israel was behind 9/11. Quote, a vicar who suggested that Israel was responsible for the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers has been banned from Twitter and other social media for 6 months, the Church of England said yesterday. The Reverend Stephen Sizer used his internet accounts to spread ideas which were clearly anti-Semitic, it said. The controversy over the vicar came to a crisis last month when he posted an article on his Facebook page which attempted to connect wealthy Jews to the attacks. Is this anti-Semitic? Mr. Sizer commented under the link, adding, it raises so many questions. Yesterday, Bishop of Guildford, the Right Reverend Andrew Watson said that the Vicar's campaigning on the Middle East was no longer compatible with his ministry as a parish priest. By associating with or promoting subject matter which is either ambiguous in its motivation or, worse still, openly racist, he has crossed a serious line. I regard these actions as indefensible. And, quote, now as always, links will be provided at AusRoundtable.com, including to the Metapedia article, which the Vicar himself links to. Check it for yourself, make up your own mind. In any event, the key point here is that posting a link to a site which accuses Israel of involvement in 9/11 is enough for a 6-month social media ban. What more needs to be said? I'll throw that one straight to you there, Leith. I got confused there. Who do I want to throw that one to? How about Lindsay? You're next, mate.
Okay, yeah, the first thing that comes to me is they can't find this horrible ISIS and all their horrible links and what have you on Twitter, but they can pick on a vicar and ban him. I would have thought they'd been able to ban all these people who are doing these horrible things. But anyway, just the same thing. We come back to hypocrisy. The mind boggles. Okay, back to you.
No, over to you there, Ethan.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable stuff, and it follows that a campaign that has been ongoing about banning online quote-unquote trolls who spread racial hatred via social media, well, what they disguise as racial hatred, which obviously you have just broken down there brilliantly, Johnno. And I remember RT reported a couple of weeks ago, I believe, during the Holocaust Memorial Day, I believe it was, that an all-party parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism wanted to persecute those who have been offenders that have been determined to have spread hate online, that they don't want increasingly used anti-Zionist language as a cover for racism on social media sites. And this just is a perfect example of it, because as we know, they had Mossad and all of these intelligence organizations do have infiltrators on these social networks which are going to filter out all of this. And now it just ties into the same thing of anyone that critically thinks against the system or the powers that be or the way that things go, they're going to be targeted no matter what their opinion is, no matter what their motives are, no matter what they are. If it speaks out against these people, they're going to be banned. And there's a massive move with parliamentary inquiries and everything, new laws being introduced to do this, especially against so-called anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist language. And this is just a perfect example of that, Johnno.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we'll read out another quote from old mate Malcolm X. And on the topic of Zionism, he said that Zionist Israel's occupation of Arab Palestine has forced the Arab world to waste billions of precious dollars on armaments, making it impossible for these newly independent Arab nations to concentrate on strengthening the economies of their countries and elevate the living standard of their people. Well, if the Vicar's posting of a link to a Metapedia article is anti-Semitic, then I'm sure the same people making that accusation would say that Malcolm X's quote that I just read out is anti-Semitic. How on earth can that be considered anti-Semitic? I'll throw it to you there, our guest in the studio, Tristan.
Thank you. Well, it doesn't surprise me that a lot of these things are considered anti-Semitic. They've been hiding behind a wall for a long time, and it's hard to say. I don't really feel that people like to talk about these things because it's just a universal accepted truth that you don't talk about the Jews and the prosecution and whatnot. And for a long time, people have, they've sort of just protected the Jewish and more anti-Semitic. They've thrown that card quite easily because it's just what they've been conditioned to do for a long time. And quite frankly, it's quite upsetting that a lot of other races can be attacked quite violently online, and they're not being banned for that. I mean, there's millions of examples of that happening. Yet as soon as someone posted something that slightly persecutes or ties them to something that is negative and puts them in a negative light, they're instantly banned. And that's not something that I really agree with.
Yeah, and I think it was Lindsay, you brought up a couple of weeks ago, the Jewish man, I think it was Paul Eisen, who I'd never heard of until you brought him up on the show. I went back and read some of his blog posts, and this is a Jewish man who I have an utmost amount of respect for, because he says himself, for too long people have been conflating valid criticisms of Judaism and of Israel and of Zionism with anti-Semitism, and they're doing themselves a disservice by doing that, because when you block legitimate criticism of something by accusing it of being racist or hate-filled, then all you're doing is letting it bottle up under the surface, and eventually that's going to come to the surface. What say you?
Me, yeah, I agree entirely. I like you say, I've got a lot of time for him as well, and that makes sense. But if you go back through history, these people have overreached time and time again. They get into a country like the Ukraine or wherever, they rip the peasants off until you've got poverty, and then you have a revolution, and then they have a program, and they don't seem to be able to learn. And I think that's the point he was making. He's saying to his own people, haven't you got the message? Can't you look into their eyes and see when they've had enough? And I'll go back to you with that.
Yeah, and this Paul Eisen character, I did link to him on AusRoundtable.com a few weeks ago. I'll make sure that link is again on the episode 20 page as well. People need to read this for themselves, because it's so easy to say, oh, but Johnno, you've criticised Israel on this and on that. You must be A, B, and C. Or, oh, Lindsay, you've read this book, you've read a quote from that book. You must be A, B, or C. It's so easy for people to ad hominem attack us. All right, then don't listen to us. Don't listen to people who've read history. Go and listen to a very intelligent, eloquent, and courageous Jewish man who puts in black and white, in basic form, exactly what's going on. He says it better than I ever could, and I was glad that you brought him up a few weeks ago, because I went back and checked it out, and I learned from it. And that's the point I always make on this show. It's one thing to listen to us talk about it. It's another thing to do your own research. I don't want anyone to believe anything that I ever say on this show. I want you to get an idea in your head. Go and check out to see if what I'm saying is legitimate. Check out our site, AusRoundtable.com. Check all the links we provide. Make up your own mind. Is what we're saying legitimate, or is it not? If it's not, leave a comment. If we're wrong, we'll retract it. That's the whole idea. Don't believe anything I say. Don't believe anything any of us say. Go and read the stuff for yourself. And that Paul Eisen guy, he says it better than I ever could. Ethan, I'm going to throw to you, then we're going to move on.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, John. I think you summed that up perfectly. We've spoke about this on previous episodes in depth, so if people want to check that out, go back through our catalogue and you can find, time links, timestamps rather, in the description to skip to the parts that you want to see. Because, if you want to see how we've spoken about this on a number of occasions, but we made some fantastic points again here today. I think you summed that up very well, Johnno. I could go on about it all day, but time is of the essence, as you say, so I'll throw it back to you there.
Yeah, and just on that topic, look, we're coming up to the top of the second hour here, and we've still got a few topics to get through. Now, we probably shouldn't be discussing this on the air, but since we're all here, let's give it a try. I'm happy to go to 2.5 hours today to get through all of the material. Lindsay, are you happy to stick around a bit longer?
Yeah. I might have to pull out of the chat at the end of it, because my mother will be chafing at the bit for dinner. But yeah, we'll go for another half hour.
No worries. You're happy to stick around?
Absolutely.
And that just leaves you there, Ethan. You've been outvoted anyhow, but we'll still get your opinion on this. Are you happy to stick around a little bit longer?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm outvoted anyway.
Fantastic. That's how things get done here. All right, on to the next topic, and that's another one that I've got ready from the Daily Mail. This is from 18th of February, and it's entitled "Netanyahu Humiliated After He Tries to Play Down Wealth with Video Recorded in His Decrepit Home, which is revealed to be his servants' quarters." This is quote. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been left red-faced after a video shot by a celebrity home designer depicting his modest lifestyle was revealed to be recorded in his servants' quarters. The 15-minute film by Moshe Galamin showed Mr. Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, guiding the viewer around the couple's home, where run-down parts of the property, such as creaking doors and frayed carpets, are detailed. But it has now emerged Galamin was not granted access to the couple's upstairs living quarters, and Israel's Channel 10 TV claimed the kitchen in question was not even the one the Netanyahus used, but rather a secondary administrative kitchen. In the clip, Sarah Netanyahu unveils to interior designer Galamin a simple home with creaking doors and windows, frayed carpets, dusty lamps, cracked light fixtures, and paint peeling off neglected walls. She bemoans how they didn't have the budget to fix upholstery before the 2013 visit of President Barack Obama, and says he was forced to sit on a coffee-stained couch. "I didn't notice the details because I don't dare think about it," she says as she points to mildew in a courtyard. "When you walk out, make sure the door handle doesn't break off," she said with a giggle as he parted. Netanyahu's office had no immediate comment on the TV report. The video, perhaps ironically, is set to catchy background music that includes the theme song from the Netflix series House of Cards and Justin Timberlake's hit Cry Me a River. End quote. Now, the article goes into more detail about the matter, and I encourage readers to do their own research, which we make easy for you by providing the links at AusRoundtable.com to all of our source material. The key point here is that this is the same guy, the one who would use his servants' quarters and tell the world that that's where he lives and how modest he is. This is the same guy who is in charge of a government which slaughters thousands of innocent Palestinians and claims it is done in self-defense. Need I say more? I'll throw straight to you there, Lindsay.
Yeah. Well, I don't have to say anything at all because you know how I think about this. You've pretty much summed it up. I don't think there's much I can add to that.
Ethan, we'll go straight to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. I saw this as well throughout the week, and some of the photos, ridiculous photos of them sitting there. It almost looked like a little tiny, cozy getaway holiday house, from movies with the cozy little firehouse, and they were sitting on the lounge chair reading some sort of a book, and he's wearing a jumper to, what I mean, like one of those holiday jumpers, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And we're talking about someone who is pure evil in every sense of the form, however you want to define it, is committing systematic genocide against the Palestinian people, and is being involved in so many aspects of the world that we live. And we're supposed to feel sorry for this guy because of the so-called house that he lives in. I bet only those that are manipulated by the media would feel sorry about that. But it's unbelievable. Like, of all this stuff that is happening, they just have to throw these cherries on the cake every time just to infuriate us even more, Jono.
Yeah, look, I agree, and it just sort of makes a question of what else are they lying to you about. As John has pointed out, it pretty much stands for itself. There's blatant lies, and these, but what more can you say, really?
Think of the temerity of the person. I mean, the point I make to people is, because we get so used to the lies by the TV conditioning. Oh, politicians lie. That's just what they do, blah, blah, blah. Well, think about it. Could you see yourself telling the world that you're so poor off because your servants' quarters aren't good enough? I mean, that's wrong on at least 3 levels. Could you actually see yourself doing that? I mean, could you actually see yourself telling that kind of a lie with a straight face? Could you do that? If you could, good on you. I mean, all power to you, whatever. But that is a massive, monumental lie. Just in the chutzpah of what he's doing, I don't think I could pull off such a lie. The fact that these people are the ones who get to the top of politics says a lot about the political system. But I tell you what, the next 2 topics were supposed to be to do with the United Nations revealing links with the Syrian so-called rebels, and then the topic after that was going to be to do with Lindsay discussing the topic of war and what great leaders in the past have said about war. I'm thinking we might wrap those 2 segments up into one and do that next week, a big expose on the links with the so-called Syrian moderates and who's really funding and arming them. We'll leave that one to next week because we do try to keep these shows 2 hours. We've gone a bit overboard today, but that's okay. What we're going to do now is go around for final thoughts, and then those who want to stick around for the live show can do so afterwards. But it has been a huge show. It's been fantastic to have you with us today, Tristan. It's been another fresh face to add to the collection on the Australian Roundtable podcast. Give us your thoughts on how the show's gone and any other topics that came up today.
Oh, this is the first real experience I've had with something like this. I've listened to you guys for a while now. It's very interesting. I would have liked to have researched a bit more on these subjects. So hopefully the next time I come on board, I'll be a bit more prepared.
Well, all the links will be provided at ausroundtable.com.
Of course. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it with you guys. I hope you have me on next.
We'll have you back again. Don't you worry about that. We'll move around to you then next, Silver Fox. Any final thoughts, mate?
No. I think we've pretty much covered everything we wanted to cover today. We've got a couple of articles that'll go back for next week. Oh, no, wait a minute. Next week's birthday week. Anyway, it'll go back to the future. But no, I'm very pleased with the way it's gone today. I hope everybody listening is. No doubt they'll give us some feedback and so we can work out what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to our listeners. That's it. Thanks for that.
Over to you, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. I knew last week on the show, since I devoted my soul to ISIS, that my word would prevail and we wouldn't go to a 2.5-hour show. But I would just want to thank the listeners for tuning in once again. It was awesome to have Tristan on the show. Tristan's is one of the best dudes that I've conversated with outside of just our circle that we have, and it was tremendous to finally have him on the show. So I thank Tristan for coming on, and hopefully we can see him a lot more on the show. But my final thoughts are to just please go and check out all the links that we've we've left, I really stress the importance, especially of the background on drones, and especially Tony Abbott's speech that he's going to deliver tomorrow, which could bring about Homeland Security in Australia and tougher laws on those who speak out against the system. So I will be following that, and I'll definitely have updates about it, as well as the metadata retention laws, which the Senate debates are about to, begin, and the whole process is about to begin again, which they're trying to ram through at the moment. But that's all I've got to say. Thank you for everyone for joining in, and check out tottnews.com. I've got so many things coming up in the future. It's just making some time to get them all smashed out, and they're going to start coming out very regularly, so tune into that, and thanks for supporting us.
Fantastic stuff. Well, I'll start off by reading out some listeners' feedback, as we promised we'd do. This is a comment that was posted to the comments section of our website at ausroundtable.com, and this is from a gentleman named Kevin Duckworth. He says, "Gentlemen, I would like to pass on my deepest thanks to all of the team at your site, which I have just discovered thanks to PK. Your discussions are pertinent and to the point with no bullshit added. In the episode number 17, I found the dissertation on the Jewish influence in the Nixon government most enlightening, though not in the least surprising, and I commend that man for his research and excellent presentation, which should be published in as many media outlets as possible. Many thanks to you all, and a special salute to PK, because PK, you're not just an ordinary bloke, you, sir, are extraordinary, and I raise my sombrero to you out of respect and admiration to your humanity, perspication, and your devilish wit and sense of humour during this time of war." Did you write this yourself, PK? With all kinds of regards to you all, I follow your example here in Argentina as an ex-Brit, and I mean ex-Brit. I have no truck with the country of my birth, nor their politics of injustice and corruption. The UK is run by a nest of pedos and wannabe elites who portray themselves as guardians of the people, but are no more than wolves looking after the sheeple. You men are the wolfhounds that could save the flock. Cheers and all power to our collective elbows. Kevin Duckworth. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. If you're listening right now, that's exactly the kind of feedback we love to get. And there are so many people out there who are enjoying the work that we're doing. And that leads me into my next point, which is to do with next week's episode. Lindsay, you touched on it. Next week is our 21st episode. And, of course, during this week, we passed our 1,000th subscriber, which is so far above and beyond what we ever expected. So next week is, of course, going to be our 21st birthday episode, where any listeners who do want to come on the show, who are happy to use Google Hangout and come and join us for, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, you want to just join us, join the Google Hangout and leave, you're welcome to do that. Get in touch with us between now and next week. I've already had a few people get in touch with me. I know for a fact that we've got all of our past guests. Raja B is going to be here. Zach A is going to be here. Tim O is going to be here. Tristan's going to be here. So all of our live guests will be here. And so even if no of our live listeners join us, we're going to have a great time. But we want to get some live listeners on the show as well. I've already heard back from at least a couple of live listeners who are interested. I've already Skyped with one. He says he's on board. So who knows how much fun next week is going to be. It's up to you guys. If you want to join us, I'm putting the welcome out there. All you need to do is get in touch with us. Our details are available at ausroundtable.com. We'd love to have as many of you on the show as possible. Getting back to my early next week, of course, back to my final thoughts, I wanted to make a mention of the Max Resistance Roundtable, who, of course, were the first group that I'm aware of who did shows like this. Certainly, I heard them early on, and they inspired me. I've been on their show a few times. I love them. Just during the week, they had what I thought was their best episode to date. They had an amazing guest on. If you're someone who's not familiar with the Max Resistance Roundtable, you need to go and check them out. I will put a link underneath this video on YouTube and at our site, ausroundtable.com. Their guests during the week, I got a chance to listen to it yesterday. It was phenomenal stuff, and these are just amateurs like us. They don't get paid for the work they do. They just try and source guests, source material, get it out to the world. It's amazing stuff, and so I know a lot of our listeners are very familiar with the Max Resistance Roundtable, but if you're not, make sure you go and check them out, because if you think the shows that we do are good, you'll be blown away by how good their show was during the week. Move on to my next point. I have some important words to speak on the event skeptic community and what's transpired in the last week. I'll be doing that in our live Q&A because I think I didn't want to take up any of our show time dealing with this matter anymore. I thought it's better to be left with the Q&A. So if you stick around for the Q&A, you'll get to me make some very important points about that. And finally, I just want to say thanks to all of the live listeners. There's been some terrific comments in the live chat. I've been keeping tabs on that. We've been up to between 50 and 60 live listeners throughout the show, which is phenomenal stuff. So thanks to everyone for spreading the word. We will be back here, of course, 3 p.m. next week for the 21st birthday bash. So I look forward to seeing you there. If you're listening live, stay on board. We're going to get to the Q&A immediately after this. But if you're just listening to the official upload later on, this has been episode 20. You've been with Tristan, the Silver Fox, Lindsay, Ethan of TTT News, and myself, John LeBon of johnlebon.com. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll catch you in about 7 days' time.
Thank you.